If you can walk away with that and be okay, don't expect the other person to do the same thing.
Okay, bring the mic here to the front, please.
Thank you. My name is Namaka Enechi. I'm of the older generation, as you said. I'm sorry, Leseho. I'm just going to say one word. That issue has been overflowed, but I think it's important. Even in marriage, a woman still retains the right to say no, much less after a beer. So I just wanted to add that. Even in marriage, a woman has the right to say no, and the husband is obliged to respect that. I want to talk a bit about, hi, Cynthia. What you said about merging the past with we're losing ourselves because we're not retaining our culture. I agree with you. As Africans, as black Africans, we do have a culture to celebrate and hold on to. But I want to push you a little bit and say, do we hold on to a culture just because it's a culture? Or do we stay embedded in our culture, but forward thinking, find ways to refine, to polish it? Because in our history, in this same culture, are things like twins have been killed in the past as something in black history. We have gender mutilation, genital mutilation. We have gender biases. So in agreeing with you, I also want to push you and also to push the young people in this room. In accepting our culture, we should not cease to find ways to refine, to push forward, while remaining indigenous and true to it. The last thing I know, I don't want to take up too much space. I'm not classified as a youth, but I do want to touch a bit on race because it's also important. It's sweet that you are starry-eyed about race and you say, well, I see, inner beauty. That's sweet. There's something beautiful about it. But then we also have the reality on the ground, which is that race exists. Racism is a reality. I have an interesting background because I come from a country where there is just one race. And then I stepped into the United States, which, by the way, shares a very common history to South Africa. And the black American reminds me a lot of the black South African. And so I come into that space, proud black African that I am, not seeing racism. And I walk into an office and things happen, and my black American friends are like, oh my goodness, that guy was so racist. And I'm like, oh, I just thought he was having a bad day, because that's my reality. I come from Nigeria where there are awful people who are black. There are disrespectful people who are black. And the American will see that as racism. I'll see that as someone who is just being rude. But then in time, I got to learn their history, and I saw their story, and I realized that just as I, as a result of my experiences, didn't see race, they saw just race. And it's true for South Africa. You have a history that is rooted in pain, in bloodshed, in injustice. And that history is real. Now, are we going to stand in it and say, well, it's racism, we're going to let it rule us? No. But are we going to close our eyes to it? No. So it's standing in it fully conscious of your history, but seeing it as a means to empower yourself, realizing that it's true, this is where my roots lie, but I'm not going to be governed by that. I'm going to stride forth in confidence and be who I am and not take nonsense from anybody.
Thelma, is that where your feminism and commitment to justice comes from? Or Mamaka Thelma? I'm going to close here and ask my panelists if they want the opportunity to speak for no more than 1 minute. It can be a closing thought, it can be a response to a particular question, or just telling me, alternatively, how you feel about the future given everything we've discussed. What is your level of optimism or pessimism about the country in which you are teenagers right now? I'm going to start in no particular order, just from here. Thelma?
I think that in respect to race, it does exist, but then if you let it bring you down, I guess that, like, if you see yourself as black, and then you go out there and you're like, oh, that's like a white community. And then you shouldn't degrade yourself because those people don't have two heads. the color of your skin doesn't mean that you can do what they do. You shouldn't let that degrade you. You should be like, okay, if there are no black people here, I can be the first black person here, and then I can be the person to bring in more black people, and so that everything will be equal. Yeah, that's just what I want to say.
Thank you. Amanda? Okay, Jacinta?
I feel like if we can only stop like segregating each other like with color and whatnot, differentiating like each other, like regardless of that, treating each other as one, having to have that one mindset of one rainbow nation, we could go far and embrace unity.
Makaziwa?
Since all of us pointed out problems, and since
Amanda? Kelma?
since Salma came up with this sanitary towels thingy, I thought, why don't we use this platform to actually start a program to help young girls out there? If all of us right here are pointing out problems and not all of us are actually coming up with proactive solutions, then why don't we as people right here right now come up with programs to actually help the girls out there? So yeah.
Firstly, I want to thank our panelists. I think they've been incredibly thoughtful. There's so much to chew on, so much to take away. The number, the nature, and the scope of the problems that we face as a country are so big that we will never problem solve them in one 100-minute conversation. But conversations are critical, and we dare not stop speaking, stop trying to problem solve. So the first thing I'd like you to ask is to put your hands together again, and please thank these young ladies for me. Secondly, I want to share with you, which is the reason why this annual gathering on Youth Day here is so special for me in part. There are many young people across the city of Johannesburg. There are many different schools in this wonderful city of ours, but we live apart. We live in different parts of the city as a result of the historic legacies of our country. And the Joburg of Ennerdale is not the Joburg of Houghton. It's not the Joburg of Sandton. There are many privileged kids who are not here today, who live in parts of Johannesburg that look like Europe, that do not know what Soweto looks like, doesn't know the south of Joburg. We are deeply, deeply divided country, divided cities. Not just Cape Town, as much as we like scapegoating Cape Town. Even Jozi, we've got our own problems. These are South African stories. Some of us are more burdened than others. If you are poor in this country, it is a really tough place to live in. If you are a poor black woman in this country, it's an even tougher place. If you're a poor black lesbian, it is even tougher. Not even to talk about intersex persons or transgender people or people with disabilities. So we have a range of injustices. All of us have different crosses to bear, but the truth is that some of our crosses are heavier than others. And the reason why, for me, it's always special to come into this space is that I know that most of you come from a similar family background as me. I was the first person in my family to finish high school. My sisters had both had teenage pregnancies, as my cousin can testify. One of them ended up temporarily in a mental institution in Grahamstown because of the challenges of growing up in a broken home with divorced parents and a mom we didn't have the language back then, or maybe in our communities, we don't like using this word. But I think my mom, bless her soul, was probably clinically an alcoholic. And my sisters suffered at their hands. I suffered less. I was cushioned. So I know the struggles of trying to survive in communities that are incredibly poor and in families where, as someone rightly pointed out, even if you are safe by not jogging in the street, the person who preys on you can be back in the shack that you go home to. You're not safe in the streets, you're not safe on university campuses, and many of us are not safe in our own homes. I myself was raped for many years by my cousin who lived with me. So being scared of the stranger in the street is one thing, The truth of the matter is, most of us who are violated by people that we know. So it is a horrible, harsh world. And when I listen carefully to all of your contributions on the panel and from the floor, it's clear to me that you, as teenagers, speak with the level of life experience of 50, 60-year-olds who have lived in really tough circumstances. And I'm deeply sorry that you have to experience that. I also think that we sometimes obsess about the exceptional stories. So, for example, I've got a reasonably good story to tell. The only blemish on my CV is that I decided not to finish my PhD at Oxford. But I've got 3 degrees, all with distinction. I've done extremely well. I've been a world champion. But there's a snag. The one thing that keeps me humble, and I think I shared this story last year in this space, Wadey, was I'll never forget back in grade 1, which gives in standard 1, which gives away my age, back when we had 4 provinces. I remember the teacher in my school saying, and I was top of my class, saying to me, "You see, Bes, jy's baie slim, maar jy's nie so slim soos jou sister nie. You see, Bes, you are clever." And remember, I'm top of my class, but you're not as clever as your sister. My sister was 2 years older than me. And that keeps me humble because it made me realize I was a very competitive kid. I suffered a lot of abuse, sexual abuse, and also being teased a lot. I was extremely effeminate, and I used to be called Moffy the whole day. So I had a really horrible time at school as well, but I did well academically. But that teacher's words stuck with me. It didn't demotivate me. It just made me realize as an adult that I was lucky. I don't discount the fact that I worked hard and the things that I've achieved as an author, as an analyst, as a broadcaster, as a public speaker. I deserve credit for it, and I pat myself on the back. But I also know that I could have been my sister. My sister could have been the one, after all, she was cleverer than me, who ended up writing 3 books, who could have been sitting here as the moderator. I could be the one back in Grahamstown, being a teenage dad. What distinguishes me from her? It has to be luck. Because at the age of 10, how you respond to divorce is not up to you. 10-year-olds are just too young. And so I buried my nose in books and playing the piano and ended up going to a good Model C school, went to Rhodes University and then Oxford University. They did what most normal people do, which is to lash out, have sex, make poor choices, try to commit suicide. I'm not special. I just had luck in how I responded as a child to the same circumstances as they did. So there's a couple of lessons here that I want to leave you with. The first is, be gentle with yourselves. It is incredibly important. Many good feminists, and I hope your mom has used this word at home with you, talks about the importance of self-care. Be very gentle with yourself. You did not choose to be born into the context into which many of you were born into. Secondly, it's good to be the best you can be, but don't beat yourselves up if you're not exceptional. I'm almost at the place where I'm going to accept that I will never have a six-pack and be a top billing presenter. But I know the things that I'm good at, and I'm competitive with myself, with my writing, my public speaking, my broadcasting. And in this country, not only do we deprive everyone of a chance to live well, but you're not even allowed to be average. And many of us are average at most activities, and that is okay. You should be striving to live a life of fulfillment. But I do want to lastly challenge you. You can't do much about the big picture, but you do have small opportunities to be the best possible you, notwithstanding the challenges of your household and your communities. Read. Read anything you can lay your hands on. I had no clue what I was reading as a child because there was no one in my house that was reading. Now as an adult, speaking to all these other fancy authors at book events, I realized how random my reading choices were as a teenager. Anything from the famous 5 to the secret 7, the magic faraway tree, And as I said yesterday in my radio show, quite embarrassingly, if any of the adults know this, they'll know why it's embarrassing for a kid to have read this book. Virginia Andrews, Flowers in the Attic, not things you're supposed to read as a 12-year-old. But that's because I literally read everything. Did I read because I knew that reading is an important part of escaping poverty and sexual violence? No, I didn't know that. Of course not. Which is why I have quite a bit of confidence. Sometimes I have the confidence of a mediocre white man, which is useful if you want to make it in life. But I also keep myself humble. And I keep myself humble because I know that when I chose to read ferociously, the only reason why I used to read a lot is because I wanted to not hear the violence at home. I didn't want to hear my uncle and my cousins arguing. And burying my nose in a book helped me to escape my circumstances. Even so, I needed luck. The luck of a Catholic nun taking me to a Model C school. The luck of an old boy from my school helping me apply to get into Rhodes University. Lots of luck in my life. So there's hard work and luck. And nothing is a more fantastic combination for maximizing your chances of success in life than the combination of luck, opportunity, hard work, and decent genes. Not all of that is within your control, but it's up to you whether you take the opportunities you can. You need one good teacher, you don't need a good school. If you have a teacher at your school that says, stay after school, I'm running a debating society, stay. Public speaking, stay. Toastmasters Club, you stay. We're going to go for an excursion to the Apartheid Museum, you say yes, please. And you guys have done that. That's why you are here. Reading, not all our libraries are well stocked. If I was Minister of Basic Education for one day, I would spend money to make sure every school has a library, and a library that is decently stocked. But if you do get the chance to read, take it. Whether you read the Daily Sun, I don't care. Whether you read the Sowetan, which is a great paper, by the way, I don't care. Whether you read Eusebius McKaiser, read Ichlabi, Tandom, Golozana, doesn't matter. But I also want to tell you that there are many people who are now writing stories in your community. One of this country's best writers, Nick Mshlongo, is from Soweto. His books are located here. You will find characters in Black South African authors that look like you, that come from our communities, not Buten Sarki who go to the beach with blonde hair and you can't relate to them. So these things exist. So be kind to yourself, but please, please, please read yourself out of your circumstances. Thank you so much for coming today. I want to ask you to just stay for 30 seconds so that the boss lady can have the final say. Wady.
Most of them speak about issues that pertains to all of us. I was the issue about the white weddings has been something that's been sitting in the back of my head for such a long time, since Our Perfect Wedding has been on TV, in fact. And I keep thinking, what are you doing? Why are you doing a white wedding when it's not your culture to do it? But some of us we are so influenced from all the years of colonialism and apartheid, and what was instilled in us as being correct, as being the right way. We have to work past that, and we can look at you guys, and we have to be the role models, and we're not very good role models, are we? We're not. So we have to start looking at you. We have to look at ourselves, obviously, and start changing. But we also have to look at you and say, look at our mistakes, like the other lady said, and work yourself out of that culture that is wrong. Because there are some of our cultures that just don't gel with the young people anymore, that doesn't gel with the new society, with the new South Africa, that sometimes were put in place in order to live peacefully under apartheid. And so we must look past those things and look at our own development and our own cultures, and as they emerge, because cultures also change and changes with society. But I want to say thank you so much to these young ladies. They are absolutely amazing to me. To have heard each one's insightful thought. It was considered, it was well thought through, they had done research, and they could speak eloquently on it. And for me, that is absolutely fantastic. Congratulations.